right, today we're going to talk about proving the community legend ghosts. So of course, we have to start out with researching our ghosts. There's a few things we need to know. That person has to have a name. You can't research a ghost when you don't know who the person was or where they're located. So we need to know where that haunting is. We also have to write down our story and pick that story to pieces to find out more information, to find our proofs and our documentation. So let's get started. So where are we going to find those proofs? Websites, archival collections, census records are great for putting the person in a place at a time. City directories, newspaper articles, our book collection, vital records, birth, marriage, death records, cemeteries, where were they buried? Military records, employment records, and any other proof I can find to prove whether or not the events could have happened. So our first ghost today is Jacob Frank Kramer. He's very famous, and I'm going to tell you why. The ghostly hauntings involve a well-known Houston building, one of the most haunted library buildings in the country, the Julia Idison Building at 500 McKinney. J.F. Kramer was the resident live-in custodian at 500 McKinney with his trusted German Shepherd Petey. By day he cleaned, and at night he was the live-in security guard. It has been told that J.F. Kramer, with Petey by his side, would climb the stairs to the top of the building, and he would play his violin. Houstonians venturing forth from their offices to go home would stop and listen to his music as it floated through the streets and through the air. Persons passing by would stop to hear his violin sing. On November 20th, 1936, the librarian who opened the building found Mr. Kramer lying on the floor with Petey by his side. J.F. Kramer died at the hospital November 22nd, 1936. Librarians have reported walking through the cold drafts, hearing violin music drifting through the building, and the tapping of Petey's nails on the floor. J.F.'s favorite place to cause mischief was in the music section. He would throw music onto the floor. He would knock books and things on the floor. And a lot of times when the elevators got stuck between floors, of course it had to be blamed on J.F. Kramer. I heard that one evening a past director had hired a violinist to play for an event. When the librarians heard the violin music, they were shocked. Some of them left the building and wouldn't come back for a few days. A few refused to come in, and a few were very angry at being tricked. A few years ago, our youth services kids had a lock-in, and they hired a ghost hunter to see if JF and Petey would come to the event. But alas, they did not. So let's see if these events could have really happened. So I started out with city directories on Heritage Quest Online. So first is the Houston Public Library background. It opened in 1904. It was called the Houston Lyceum and Carnegie Library. The Houston Public Library was located at McKinney Avenue and Travis Street. And at the time, the librarian was Julia Bedford Idison, and they named the Julia Idison Building after her. So in the city directories, in 1913, J.F. Kramer was the janitor at the Carnegie Library. In 1915, he was still the janitor, and his residence was listed as the same. In 1917, again, he's the resident of Carnegie Library. At that time, his address was 1915 Travis. In 1920, he had a room at 114.5 Milam. And in 1926, his residence was listed as HO Public Library, short for Houston. In 1935, he was listed as the janitor of the Houston Public Library in the Houston Public Library building. Okay, the city directory has him listed there, so I went on a hunt and I found in the 1930 census, it lists J.F. Kramer. In 1857 is his birth date. He was 73 in 1930. He was born in Ohio. And believe it or not, he's listed as living in the Julia Idison building, and he is the only one on the sheet, and he is the only residence listed in a Houston building downtown. There he is. Okay, I have his death certificate, and it lists him, his date of birth, his date of death. He was listed as the custodian at his workplace and the industry as the custodian in Houston Public Library. It gives when he was stricken and under doctor's care, and it basically he had a heart attack and other chronic issues. There are always conflicting evidence. It says in the census he was born in Ohio, and on his death certificate it says he was born in Baltimore, Maryland. But we know it's the right person because he's listed as the custodian in the Houston Public Library. So I went hunting for an obituary. I learned that he didn't have an obituary because he was not buried in Houston or Texas. So if you're looking for someone that does not have an obituary, look in the mortuary collection. It lists him, J.F. Kramer, and it lists him as being 63. So there was a difference there. And he has a surviving sister, and they are waiting to contact her so that she can claim the remains. And her name was Mrs. Weidman. And he was removed and buried in Kansas. And he is in the Find a Grave for Kansas. My next ghost is kind of a very sad story. Mr. Roy Sims. Let me give you an idea about Mr. Sims. Mr. Roy Sims was the foreman of the meat locker at Texas A&M College, which is now university. He was slicing meat, or basically a slab of bacon. The assistant working with him had exited the building, and before he came back, Mr. Sims was holding a knife in his hand, and when he cut the slab of bacon, it slipped and severed his femoral artery. He was found bleeding out on the floor by his assistant when the assistant came back. The ambulance was summoned, but to no avail. He was gone before they put him in the ambulance. Students have reported unusual occurrences while working in the meat locker. Persons alone reported strange sounds or feeling like they were being watched. Others had experienced objects moving around the room from their assigned places, and some have heard footsteps. The old meat locker has been renovated. It's now an office space and classroom area. And I have it on good authority from a former student that the presence of Roy Sims might still linger on, but he did not experience any encounters. For students today, there are reminders of Mr. Sims' death because now students, before they start their work with cutting meat in the meat locker, are cautioned about safety rules so that the incident would not happen again. So, reported ghostly events by former students. Could he be haunting the building? Let's find out. The headlines in the Bryan Daily Eagle, December 1959, was "Slip of the Knife Kills Roy Sims." He was an employee at Texas A&M College, a College Station, and he was an instructor in the meat locker in the industrial building, the meat industrial building. So let's see if I can prove the death. Where I'm going to use newspaper articles about the incidents. I'm going to see if I can find his death certificate. I have found a picture of Mr. Sims, and he was in the military prior to his employment at the college. So here is Mr. Sims in the middle, instructing students on how to use their instruments. I found this on a blog, and two other people also posted on the same blog with the same information. So I'm giving credit to all three. His death certificate proves, yes, he was there. So he has his name, his age. He was at College Station, at the college, and his father, and it came from Ancestry. And here is his death certificate. It's kind of faded and it's hard to read, but I blew it up a little bit. It says he was at the meat lab at AH Building, AM College, and that his death was an accident, and he severed his femoral artery while slicing bacon. He was given a headstone. This is the excerpt. He was a seaman for the U.S. Navy, and it has his enlistment and discharged and his death date. And he is interred at Wellborn, Texas. And this is his wife ordering his tombstone. I wonder, is he really haunting the building or not? The Ghost of Sarah Herndon. Flowers for Sarah. Sarah lived in Donahoe, they say Dunnyhoe. Once a small, thriving town is only a memory. The only things that are left are the Donahoe Road, the Donahoe Creek, and it's in Bell County, Texas. On the east side of the Donahoe, not far from the Donahoe Community Historical Marker, there's a marker, is the final resting place of Sarah Herndon. She drowned in the creek in 1863. Legend has it that you can hear her screaming for help. Sarah left her home one day, bound for the McKay family home. On the way, she somehow ran afoul of the muddy banks of the creek and became stuck in the quicksand. Not arriving at the McKays as expected, A search party was sent out to find her, but alas, they did not find her. A few days later, her body resurfaced from the quicksand along the banks of the creek. In her hand was her knitting and a sock. For when she went to the McKays, she would always bring something to do. Speculation has it, was this the reason that she fell down the hill to the banks of the creek to her death? Only she can tell you. Her grave was dug close to where her body was found. A headstone marker is her final resting place. And someone in years past has put in an old wrought iron fence that surrounds her grave. The headstone reads Mrs. Sarah Herndon, born 1800 to 1863. Chiseled in the stone is a hand with her index finger pointing to heaven. All that is left on Donoho is the community cemetery, a historical marker, and Sarah Herndon's grave. Well, this one was a real hard one. There is a lot of lack of information. The 1860 census was checked to see if I could find a Herndon family or a Sarah Herndon in the area, and I did not succeed. There are no death records for 1863 in the community that I have located. I tried all the newspapers I could find to see if there was a mention of her or of her death, and I have found no record. In Find a Grave, there is pictures of the grave and flowers. At present day, giving a Google search of the gravesite, there are some pictures. And I have found a book article about the location. So Sarah Herndon was born in 1800 and died in 1863 at the age of 63. So searching Ancestry, it led me to the link on Find a Grave and Sarah's grave location. Her grave is located near the hill at Jones Crossing on Donoho Creek, very close to where her body was found. And I have an update. Her tombstone has been taken and the fence is down. And the last posting in Find a Grave with a flower to her memory was 2001. When you locate it through Google Earth, it just shows a little bit of the area. So this was originally in Find a Grave, her little tombstone and the fence around it. The one that posted in the Find a Grave in 2001, they found no stone and they were putting up the fence again and they took a picture of the fence.
You mean say the tombstone was taken?
Yes.
Somebody removed it or
Somebody removed it. Now, whether they were going to redo it or were trying to just have a remembrance, I don't know, but it's not there. However, and I have the bibliography, there's a ghost story in the Bell County book and a location to find her. And if you Google her grave on Google, it does come up and it does give the story. But again, her resting place is no longer, that I know of, marked other than the little fence. The legend of the Olive Ghost Train is from Olive, Texas, or the Sunset, Texas. It's 3 miles north of Kunse and 30 miles north of Beaumont, close to what is now Highway 69 and 287, Farm Road 1003, North Central Hardin County. And in 1888, S.C. Olive and J.A. Sternbergen created a sawmill. It was called the Sunset Sawmill along the new roadway built in Sabine and the East Texas Railroad. And then there was a feeder road built to the sawmill. The legend of the ghost train. 18-year-old Tim Hargrave left his family behind in West Virginia and boarded a train for Texas to start a new life at the sawmill. Among his mother's things, he found a letter from Uncle Mart with an address of Olive, Texas. Tim bought a ticket on the Southern Railroad to New Orleans, and then another ticket to the South Pacific to Beaumont, and he arrived in Beaumont October 30th and went straight to the ticket booth and bought a ticket to the last train to Olive, north of Kuntz. The ticket master informed him the town of Olive was a ghost town. Only a few houses and families remained, so Tim got on the East Texas Railroad with his passes to Olive. The train conductor told him he would stop the train so he could get off, saying that Olive was not a place to be in the dark. When the train stopped in Olive, the conductor gave him directions to Julius Berg's house, who lived about a mile or so up the dirt path. So Tim started walking up the dark, dusty road, when out of nowhere he heard a clunk of a steam engine and a loud whoo whistle. The engine's headlights lit up the night sky. Tim stepped off the road so the train could roar by. Shaken and confused, he realized there were no train tracks and no crossroads, just dirt. Finding Berg's house, Tim heard about the ghost train. Yep, Mr. Berg said that on Halloween night every few years or so, the train comes out and rumbles by. Mr. Berg knew Mark Hargraves. He was the train engineer at the old Olive Sawmill. When the mill was closed in 1912, he moved to Liberty and worked at the Kirby Mill on the log train. But Uncle Mart, he died some years ago. He passed away. But he still drives that train. Mr. Berg told Tim to find Mr. Williams at the Kirby Mill. He would hire you and tell him old Jules sent you. There's been many years ago now, and no one has reported seeing the Olivewood ghost train. But if you hear a locomotive dart out of the forest ahead of you in Olive, it's old Mark Hargraves running late as usual and heading for the mill with a load of logs. It's a short version, but I like it. So let's talk about Mart Hargrave. Doing some research, I did not find anyone with the name of Mark Hargraves. But I did find a Peter Munson Hargraves, and he was living in Voth, which is Jefferson County, Texas. And he was 33 years of age. His birth date was March 14th in 1885. And this is his draft card. And he was a locomotive engineer. And he was working at the Keith Lumber Company in Voth, Jefferson, Texas. And it has his wife. And then the rest of his enlistment. And it came from Ancestry. And I don't know why Ancestry shows up there. But he came, I found it in Ancestry. So he's not an Olivewood, but there are indications he actually worked there. So I looked up his death certificate, and it gives the same information as his military record. And he died at age 53. And here he's a locomotive engineer. And it says at the bottom of his death certificate that he died either in an accident, murder, or suicide. I'm thinking maybe he was in a train accident, which would justify the story. Well, this is one of my favorites, kind of, and it fits perfectly with October. It's the legend of the Olive Ghost Train. So let me review a little bit. So Peter Munson Hargraves, aka Mart, he had an occupation of a locomotive engineer. He died in a train accident. I searched the newspapers. I searched other stories to see if I could connect a train accident in 1938 where he might have died. He was working for a lumber company in Hardin, Texas. He was still working at the Keith, and the boundaries have changed. So he's now in Hardin County versus Jefferson County. But you know, I never did find a Tim Hargraves. Never could find him anywhere. So there's no information. Ghost story or family story? Take the time to share the story, and don't forget to write it down. I hope you enjoyed my ghost stories and my analogy of, is it a ghost or is it not? Only you can decide. Any questions?
So you were able, where did you find these stories to begin with?
I found them on Google, on internet. There are lots of ghost stories about cemeteries. There's the one about the spaghetti warehouse. There are the ghost stories from the flood in Galveston. The Galvez Hotel has quite a few ghost stories, but not a whole lot of them actually name somebody. So it's kind of hard to know who is haunting these places if you can't put a name to the person and the place and the location. Some of the genealogists now I've seen, they're actually doing research on the place, the house, the location, who owned the house and who lived there. I just kind of did it a little backwards and looked for the person first, and then I can put them together with the location that they are known to haunt.
Existing stories.
Yes.
And research the people that were named.
That were named to see if this person really could have maybe haunted the location that they're associated with.
I'll just say that we did talk about the ghost at A&M.
Yes, we did.
Which I did confirm. I was there between 80 and 84. And I did have one class in what was formerly an agricultural classroom.
Yes.
Where they used to do or demonstrate butchery and things like that.
Mhm.
And I was told at the time to watch for anything out of the ordinary because there was supposed to be a ghost there. But I've never heard a name or anything like that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my ghost stories. And if you have any ghost stories to share, let me know. I'm always up for more research.